afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this news conference from the Hawaii State Teachers Association, reacting to announcements a short while ago by Governor David Ige and State Health Director Bruce Anderson. We have Corey Rosenlee, who is the Hawaii State Teachers Association president here, who is going to give a few brief remarks, and then he'll be taking questions from reporters. So, Corey?
Hello, everyone. I'm Corey Rosenlee, president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Today, Governor Ige, Mayor Caldwell, and Health Director Bruce Anderson held a press conference discussing the 28 days of restrictions for Oahu. During this press conference, this is what some of the things they said. Number one, to restrict gatherings of no more than 5 people, but they exempted schools. We know this week that there were some campuses across the state where there were hundreds of students on campuses. And next week, the state is allowing vulnerable students to come on campuses. How is the DOE defining vulnerable? They mean special education, English language learners, disadvantaged, and homeless. When you combine all 4 of those categories, that represents 57% of all students. How is this going to happen in our classes and be less than 5 people? Next, the mayor asked that if you can work from home, you should work from home. Of course, except for teachers. When teachers across the state have been asking for telework, they have been denied by their schools and denied by the complex area superintendents. Third, Health Director Bruce Anderson said that when asked the question of what metrics are needed in order to open up our schools, he said, well, we got to get the team together to start looking at that. Except a month ago, when the Senate COVID committee asked Health Director Bruce Anderson that exact same question, he said at the time they were going to form a team, and they still haven't done it. A month later, even after our schools have opened, it is now too late. We've already had 23 school campuses where there's been a COVID case. And we've had some campuses where there have now been children involved. And we are looking into even more cases. When Health Director Bruce Anderson was asked about a model to look at of what it should look like for opening our schools, he used Florida as example. I'm floored that he's using Florida as an example. In one county alone in Florida, they have over 200 people quarantined. In Florida, they have 46,000 children that have come down with the coronavirus, including 7 who have died, including a 9-year-old girl. This is not the model we should be using to think about opening up our schools. What we've seen now is this, as school districts, and he said this today during the press conference, he said, I'm glad we're not first. At one point, we were supposed to be one of the largest school districts in the country to open first. But what we've seen since that time is as school districts open, they've had to shut down because of the amount of cases both in the district and in the schools. And we have not seen a successful model of schools being able to open during this pandemic. So right now we have to seriously consider if our schools are safe for our students to open. And right now we do not believe so. HSTA has been asking that we go to 100% distance learning for all students across the state until at least the end of the quarter. We're hoping that is what the governor, the superintendent, and the Board of Education will do. And with that, I'll take some questions.
Okay, reporters, why don't you just put your names over in the chat in the Zoom box there, and I'll call on you in order. Sam Spangler from KHON2. Hi, Sam.
Aloha, everybody. Corey, we heard Director Anderson talk today about CDC coming out with what he called pretty good guidance on schools across the country. What are your thoughts on the CDC guidance that he's referring to?
So the CDC guidance has not actually worked anywhere. One of the criteria we have to use is this. I think it was actually said during the press conference, this is new for everyone, and it is. But there's not been one example of a large school district in the entire country able to open up effectively. What we have seen in places like Mississippi and Georgia is that when school systems have opened, they've had to quickly close. And in both Georgia and Florida, they've had over 2,000 people in each state already quarantined. So right now, there are no good examples of what it's going to take to open up any school.
Thank you, Sam. Ashley, hi, Ashley Mizuo from Hawaii Public Radio.
Hi, thanks. So when it's up to principals about whether or not teachers have to go in for teleworking, is there any recourse, I guess, now that they are saying to work from home if you can, for teachers who aren't serving any students in person but are being mandated to go by their principal?
Right now, it is the Wild West out there when it comes to what principals are doing. In some schools, they're doing 100% distance learning for all students. Some schools, the principals are allowing telework. And in some schools, they're bringing hundreds of kids on campus. Teachers are not being allowed to telework. And it shouldn't be left up to one principal to dictate that much power over their students and the teachers. And we were hoping to see some leadership, and we're still hoping to see it. Right now, it's just not safe, and they're continuing these unsafe situations.
Any other questions? Hi, Suvan Lee from Civil Beat.
Hi. So just to piggyback up on, that question. So is it safe to say, Corey, that principals are also, coming up with their own like health and safety protocols too, for if, let's say, a case was reported on campus, and that they are just kind of left to their own devices as far as coming up with these plans?
So what we've seen so far right now is it has been all over the place of how principals are reporting it. In Mililani High, the principal, Fred Murphy, informed the entire community. Some schools are only informing the staff. There are concerns about who's being informed. And just today in Florida, there's a court case that says they have to share by school. And that's what HSTA has been asking for as well, is that there's got to be some sort of, sharing of what's going on at our schools, and the public has a right to know. Because as long as that information is not shared, then how do we know that our decision makers are making the decisions based on the most relevant data? And that's our big concern. And I will say, I am terrified that the schools that were open this week, you're going to see an explosion of cases.
And thank you, Suvan. And that case that Corey referred to at Mililani High School, that was because there was a positive case at Mililani High School, and the principal chose to notify parents, which has not been happening in a lot of other cases. Our next question is from Tiffany DeMasters from Big Island Now and Kauai Now News. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi. So Corey, the numbers, on the neighbor islands have not, been as concerning as they have been on Oahu as far as COVID cases. Do you have the same, heightened fears for the neighbor island schools, particularly on the Big Island and Kauai?
So there are cases that we are looking into right now on the Big Island, and we are trying to verify them. But no, the Big Island is not exempt. And I wish that it was not up to the teachers union to have to share what schools and what's happening. But we know from teachers reporting to us that they're concerned that there are incidences on the Big Island as well.
Do you know what schools they're looking into?
So what we've been very careful about is that before, and again, we're the teachers union. This shouldn't be our job, but we're going to do it because the state is not doing it. But we are doing our best right now to verify it, that there are cases that we can share. And then once we have the evidence, then we can share those specific schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. And we also had Susan Asoyan. You had your hand up there in the Zoom and I missed it earlier. So Susan from the Star Advertiser. Hi there.
Hi. So Corey, you mentioned and added up all the special ed English language learners and homeless and socioeconomically challenged kids, and you came up with 57%. But as you know, most of those people can learn from home. I was recently at a school, had 300 students, 50 of which were special ed, and only 10 of whom were not general inclusion. And the principal had talked to all 10 parents with the teachers. The teachers had worked it out with those 10 vulnerable kids. They ultimately decided all 10 of them could be served at home. So this elementary school, even though it has a high population of special ed, is doing it all distance. Do you, as the union, object to having teachers at school in their individual classrooms when the school is all virtual like that?
So we want teachers across the state to have the option of going in and working from their classrooms. And we wish it was an option. The deep concern that we have is that my school has over 200 teachers, and if they're all required to be there, that is not a safe environment. Susan, to your previous point though too is this. What we know is that there are a lot of schools that have decided to go to 100% distance learning for all students. The most common example of students being brought on campus is for fully self-contained situations. But I've heard from numerous teachers who teach in fully self-contained rooms that you can have up to 19 people in a room, because you have many students that have one-on-one situations. And so you have 19 people in a confined area. Some of these students can't wear masks. They're definitely not maintaining 6 feet. And these teachers, everyone recognizes that these students are the ones that have the most difficulty with this learning, but this situation goes absolutely contrary to the idea of trying to avoid situations with 5 or less people. And so, of course, these teachers are concerned about the situation, and it's just not safe. And so there are, potential real risks that are part of that.
Thanks, Susan. And Corey, you were talking about fully self-contained, and that refers to students with special needs, right? That's the example you were giving. Okay, thank you. And
yes. If I just may answer Susan's question, but I want to be clear, it's not just FSC. We are getting data from our teachers across the state right now, and we know that on some campuses, they're bringing on English language learners, they're bringing on all SPED students, they're bringing on the disadvantaged students. So when they say it's disingenuous to say that our schools are going 100% distance learning next week when you have potentially this many students on campus.
Thank you. And next from Hawaii Island, Sherry Bracken from New West Broadcasting. Hi, Sherry. You want to unmute there and ask your question?
Oh, yep. You mean you can't read my lips? I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
okay.
Sherry.
I have 2 questions. One is, I did talk to a couple of teachers from East Hawaii who do want to teach in person. And how do you address those people who really do want to be there? I don't know if you're looking for a blanket solution or individual solutions. So that's my first question.
So I've heard from teachers too. There are teachers that miss their students. There's a reason why we're teachers. Everyone knows that face-to-face learning is the ideal solution. But this is what it all comes down to. When we're looking at whether it's safe to open up our schools, I'm looking at all the other school systems that have started. And there was just a article today in the New York Times that basically said there is not one major school system that's been able to open effectively. If New York is looking into it, but they're looking at delaying. And I think those teachers that really want to be there, that happens until they start hearing about cases in their neighborhoods and in their schools, and then those teachers are also concerned. And I think that as long as we're not transparent, that makes it hard for teachers to get good information. And it all depends on what schools they are. And one of the things I've had to say to my fellow teachers is, you may be young and healthy, but you also have to think about, if you want all the teachers to be back, how about that teacher that has, underlying health conditions or is at higher risk? And we've got to be all in this together.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, when Bruce Anderson answered that question, he sort of implied that maybe Department of Education had already been working a little bit with Department of Health on guidelines. So are you aware of any such activity? And if so, is Department of Education involving either the union or individual teachers in developing guidelines?
So the Department of Education and the Department of Health, neither one have come up with metrics of what it takes to reopen our schools. Even though this week we reopened their schools without the metrics, even though Health Director Bruce Anderson said they would come up with these metrics. So there has been nothing, the union has not been consulted, there's been nothing presented in over a month, and that's the schools have already started. And now they're planning, in a couple of weeks to open schools again without any metrics to determine whether our schools are safe. HSTA has been asking for these metrics for weeks, if not months already, and we have not gotten our answer. And I will say that his answer, that Florida is an example, I will just tell you, I was appalled that that is the model that he's looking into after they've had, just such problems in their state when it comes to opening schools.
I found that interesting since he did say we're looking at Florida, but by the way, Florida has a ton of cases. So that seemed like maybe the wrong school district to be focusing on.
It is the wrong school district, and I would challenge Bruce Anderson to find any school district where it's working right now.
Thanks so much, Sherry. And Corey, referred to the largest school districts in the country. We want to let people know that Hawaii, we're the only state in the country that has a statewide school district. And because of that, right, we are one of the 15 largest school districts in the country. We vary from year to year, but we're approximately either 12th or 13th, right, in the country. So,
of those 15, all have closed except Florida, which he mentioned, which has been a failure, and New York, which I referenced earlier, who is either looking to delay or, we'll see what happens there, because there's a lot of principals and teachers also concerned about opening up New York.
Cool. Next, we have Sam Spangler, again from KHON2. Sam.
Dr. Anderson admitted that they don't have the guidelines in place, that they would like to have them. Is there any kind of timeline that the HSTA is looking at to have those guidelines in place before you would be comfortable with schools reopening again?
Those guidelines should have been out last week. We've already reopened our schools. They're planning on reopening our schools in another 3.5 weeks without any metrics. I cannot believe the idea that we're just going to wing it when it comes to the health and safety of our teachers and our students. This should have been out already, and it is not. Okay, and I think that the governor and the health director and the Department of Education, all of them need to ask this one basic question. Is it safe to open up our schools? And right now the evidence is no.
Anybody else have another question? If not, we thank you all for joining us. Corey, do you have any final thoughts?
No, and I just want to thank all the teachers that are watching this as well. I know how hard you've been working. Many of you said you've never worked harder before. I just want you to know that you're appreciated, that your hard work is appreciated by everyone in the community and by HSTA as well. So thank you all so very much, and aloha.
And thank you all for joining us. And if folks joined us late or you have friends who didn't get to see this, know that this live stream is going to be archived on both HSTA's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And we hope you have a good and safe day. And thank you all for joining us. Aloha.